I don't care if it's a family favor, Dad. I'm not a charity, and I'm definitely not your intern anymore. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic groaned. Across the stainless steel prep table, Shortle, my Boston Terrier, let out a low huff. He didn't move from his spot by the back door, but his big eyes followed me as I paced the kitchen. "Don't be dramatic, Patricia," Joseph said, his voice cold and flat through the speaker. "Your sister Winona is an attorney. You're a cook. This wedding is exposure. You'll donate your time or you'll prove exactly why we never supported this hobby of yours." My name is Patricia Cole. I'm 32 years old, and I finally unlocked the door to the dream that's been cooking inside me since I was 8. For 10 years, I lied. I told my family I worked in consulting, but I was actually working a breakfast line for $13 an hour and sprinting to dinner shifts that steamed my glasses blind. I folded every tip into a savings account for this place, Maze. "Exposure doesn't pay my rent," I snapped, my voice dropping to a raw whisper. "I'm done saying yes just to keep you people happy. If Winona wants me to cater her wedding, she pays the market rate. If she wants a daughter, she can start by showing up to my grand opening tonight." "We're going to a steakhouse for her birthday instead," Joan chimed in. Joan always had a way of making betrayal sound like a polite suggestion. "It's what the family decided, Patricia. Be reasonable." I hung up. The silence that followed was heavy, smelling of fresh paint and citrus oil. My sister is courtroom polished and beloved. My little brother, Lance, is the only bridge between us. I was supposed to choose something stable, but I chose fire and timing. I leaned my forehead against the walk-in cooler, trying to breathe. A small, solid weight hit my shin. Shortle had padded over, his stubby tail giving a single sturdy wag. He didn't move from his spot by the back door, but his big eyes followed me as I paced the kitchen. He was the only one who had been here at 4 a.m. when the crates arrived. He was the only one who didn't need a billable hour to value my time. I wiped my eyes and stood up straight. They wanted to treat my life's work like a side dish? Fine. They wanted a show, I'd give them a masterpiece, but it wouldn't be on their table. "They think I'm playing restaurant," I whispered. "Let's show them what happens when I stop playing nice." I turned back to the stove. We had 3 hours until the doors opened. My family wasn't coming, but the rest of the city was. I was going to cook like I had nothing left to lose, because, thanks to them, I didn't. If you're rooting for me to show them what I'm made of, smash that like button and subscribe to see how Maze handles opening night. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? The dining room was a ghost of what I'd imagined. Every table was set. Linens crisp, silver polished, the scent of citrus oil and new paint hanging in the air. At 5:59 p.m., I stood by the pass in my clean whites, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. "We cook for whoever walks through the door," I told Tina, my sous chef. She nodded, her expression grim but focused. Shortle sat tucked under the prep table, his ears alert to every click of the front door. By 7:15 p.m., the dining room was buzzing. The industry regulars were there, hugging me with their eyes. A food blogger sat at table 9, taking notes. But the corner booth, the one I'd saved for my family, stayed empty. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped into the alley, the cold air hitting me like a punch. I opened the family group chat. There was a photo, Mom, Dad, and Winona leaning into their smiles at a steakhouse downtown. Everyone looked expensive and happy. Dad had captioned it, "Happy birthday to our amazing daughter." I didn't cry. It was the kind of pain that just sets into your bones like bad weather. I looked down at the photo again. There was a sliver of empty space where I was supposed to be. Shortle pushed through the screen door, trotting out to the alley. He didn't care about the empty chair or the steakhouse. He just sat on my foot, looking up at me with those wide, honest eyes. "Chef," Tina called from the door, "we need you on Expo." I tucked the phone away. I tucked the hurt into the place where cooks keep burns, acknowledged but not indulged. "Let's go, Shortle," I said. We went back inside. We plated like we meant it. Every herb faced the right way. Every slice had a purpose. At 8:31 p.m., Lance blew through the door, his hair a mess from the wind.
"I'm sorry, Patricia," he panted, his face flushed. "Traffic was a nightmare. I'm here." I sent him the full tasting menu, course by course. Watching him eat was the only thing that kept me from shattering. By 9:40 p.m., the dining room thinned out. We had done 40 covers, respectable but not the miracle I needed to clear my debt. I sat in the tiny office and opened the books. I had spent $3,000 on opening prep. We'd made less than that back. Then the phone pinged again. "Dad, before you get mad, we need to talk about Winona's wedding. She wants it catered. Good chance to support your new business. You'll give us a family discount, of course. Let us know your price." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Shortle hopped up onto the office chair next to me, resting his heavy head on my knee. "They don't get it," I whispered. I didn't reply. I went back out and scrubbed the flat tops until they squeaked. I wiped water rings off tables my parents never touched. When I finally locked up, the city was quiet. I had a brother who showed up, a dog who stayed, and a family who thought my life was a coupon. The next morning, the adrenaline was gone, replaced by a dull ache in my back and a list of bills that didn't care about my feelings. I was on my third coffee when the messages started. "Mom, Patricia, sweetheart, we're waiting to hear about the wedding catering." "Winona, just give me a ballpark. Dad says you'll do it cheap since we're family." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. I was exhausted, living on staff meals and caffeine while they were treating my livelihood like a flea market negotiation. I typed out a response. "Catering for 200 is a massive job. Food costs alone will be 5 figures. I'll need specifics to quote." Dad didn't text back. He called. "Family supports family, Patricia," he said, skipping the greeting. "You'll cover your costs and donate your time. It's for your sister." Donate my time? I stood up, pacing the small kitchen. Shortle trotted behind me, his claws clicking rhythmically on the tile. "That's 3 weeks of work, extra staff and rentals. This is a business, Dad." "Don't be dramatic," he snapped. "Winona's career matters. This is exposure for you. High-profile people will be there." "Exposure doesn't pay my dishwasher," I said, my voice shaking. "You're a cook, Patricia. Your sister is an attorney. Try to be reasonable." He hung up. I stood there in the silence of my empty restaurant, the word reasonable ringing in my ears like a final insult. I felt a familiar pressure against my leg. Shortle was sitting there, looking up, waiting for the day to start. I put the phone down and walked to the front window. A woman in a navy blouse was standing outside, looking at the menu. It was the same woman from table 9 last night, the one with the leather notebook and the exacting gaze. She caught my eye and gave a small professional nod. "Time to prep," I whispered to Shortle. I didn't have my family's approval, but I had a dining room that needed to be ready for whoever actually decided to show up. I tied my apron, checked my knives, and pushed the office door open. The fight was just starting.
The woman in the navy blouse walked in at 7:10 p.m. and asked for a seat with a view of the kitchen. She didn't have a companion, just that same leather notebook. "Back again?" I asked as I dropped off a carafe of water. "I had to see if last night was luck or skill," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were like a hawk's. "Which is it so far?" "I'll let you know after dessert," she replied with a thin smile. I went back to the pass. My hands were steady now. This was the one place where Dad and Mom couldn't reach me. Here, I was the one who delivered the verdict. Tina and I moved in a blur of synchronized motion. Shortle stayed tucked under the prep table, his presence a warm weight near my feet. Every time a ticket printed, he'd perk his ears up, as if he were counting the orders with me. By the time the woman finished her panna cotta, the kitchen felt like a furnace. She stood up, walked to the window, and set a business card on the counter. Sophie Noyen, Portland Monthly. My heart dropped into my stomach. She wasn't just a blogger, she was the most influential food critic in the city. "That dumpling recipe?" she said, looking me in the eye. "It's different."
It's my grandmother's, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. She'd be proud. It's ambitious, Patricia. A bit crowded, but ambitious. She left without another word. 3 days later, the review dropped. I read it sitting on a milk crate in the alley, Shortle leaning against my knee. Maze's vision is dazzling, but stumbles under its own weight. 3 stars. Chef Patricia Cole crafts flavors with tenderness, but the 15-course menu lacks restraint. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. He hadn't sent a congratulatory text. He'd sent the link to the review with a one-sentence message. Good doesn't pay loans. Maybe it's time to close up and come back to the firm before you dig a deeper hole. I stared at the screen, then at the grease-stained bricks of the alley. Average. He saw a number. He didn't see the transcendent label she gave my short ribs. I looked at Shortle. He was busy sniffing a stray leaf, completely unbothered by the opinion of a critic or a father. He's right about one thing, I muttered as I stood up. I am trying to prove too much. I walked back inside, grabbed a black marker, and went to the chalkboard menu. I started crossing things off. 15 courses became 8. What are you doing, Chef? I asked. Simplifying, I said. We're stopping cooking for my father's ghost and start cooking for the people who actually sit in these chairs.
January hit like a debt collector. Cold, relentless, and full of reminders that dreams have due dates. The new simplified menu had stabilized the kitchen, but it hadn't fixed the bank account. I was holding at 35 covers a night, just shy of breaking even. I was in the back office, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to turn green. Shortle was snoring at my feet, his little tuxedo-patterned body twitching as he chased dreams' whirls. He's the only one sleeping well in this building, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. The freezer had died at 3 a.m. I'd lost $2,000 in prep. I'd spent the morning arguing with repairmen and maxing out my last personal credit card to buy a used unit from a restaurant that had folded the week before. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. Joan has said, Patricia, Winona is getting stressed. She needs a yes on the catering. Dad says if you do this for her, he might consider helping you with your business loan. Think about it. The air in the office felt thin. It wasn't an offer, it was a bribe. They wanted me to admit I couldn't do it alone by forcing me to work for free. I looked at Shortle. He woke up, stretched, and rested his chin on my boot. If I take Dad's money, I'm an employee again, I said to the dog. If I don't, we might lose the lease by March. Shortle let out a sharp single bark, the kind he only used when he wanted to go for a walk. Forward motion. That was his only setting. I stood up and deleted the message. I didn't need a bribe. I needed a miracle, or at least a very busy Friday night. I walked out to the line, grabbed a sauté pan, and started the mise en place. We're running a special tonight, I told Tina. Grandmother's braised short ribs. Full price. No discounts for anyone. I wasn't a cook playing restaurant. I was a business owner fighting for her life. The Tuesday rush was more like a trickle. I was standing at the pass, mindlessly polishing a stack of plates, when the bell above the door gave a lonely chime. I expected a stray customer or a delivery driver, but it was Lance. He looked around the empty dining room, his expression caught between pity and admiration. Rough night? It's Tuesday in January, Lance. The city is hibernating, I said, setting the plate down. I led him to the back, away from the front windows. Shortle was already waiting by the office door, his nub of a tail doing double time. He adored Lance, mostly because my brother was the only member of the family who didn't look at a dog as a liability. I saw the texts, Patricia, Lance said, dropping into my office chair. Shortle immediately hopped onto his lap, claiming his territory. Dad is being an ass, even for him. He wants me to fail so he can be right, I said, leaning against the doorframe. It's a power move. Use the wedding to break me, then save me with a loan that comes with a leash. Lance sighed, scratching Shortle's chest. He told Mom he's worried about your instability.
but we both know he just hates that he can't bill your hours. I'm not doing the wedding for free, Lance. I can't. If I close the kitchen for 3 weeks to cater Winona's ego, Maze dies. The margins are that thin. I know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded check. That's why I'm doing this. I took the paper. My eyes widened. 5,000? Lance, you don't have this kind of money. I've been saving for a new car. The old sedan still runs. Besides, he looked at the wall where my grandmother's photo hung. I'd rather invest in a Cole who actually builds something than a Cole who just bills people. I tried to hand it back, my throat tight. I can't take your car fund. It's not a gift, he said, standing up and gently shifting Shortle back to the floor. It's an investment, 10% equity, legal and real. That way, when Dad asks how you're staying afloat, you can tell him you have a partner who actually believes in the business model. I looked at the check, then at my brother. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. Shortle sat between us, looking back and forth like he was witness to a contract. 10%, I whispered. I'll have the papers drawn up. Good, now feed me, Lance grinned. I'm a shareholder now. I expect a professional meal. I laughed, a real, raw sound that felt foreign in my own throat. I went to the stove. I wasn't out of the woods, but I wasn't alone in the dark anymore.
The check sat on my desk like a dare. $5,000 wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover the late payment to my fishmonger and keep the lights on for another month. More importantly, it was a shield. 2 days later, Winona called. She didn't lead with a hello, she led with a demand. I need the menu finalized by Friday, Patricia. Mom said you're being difficult about the guest count. Just make it work. I signaled Tina to take over the pan of searing scallops and stepped into the alley. Shortle followed me, his breath puffing in the cold air as he did his ritual patrol of the brick walls. I'm not being difficult, I said, my voice flat. I'm being a business owner. I sent you a contract, Winona. Standard rates, 50% deposit up front. I haven't seen it signed. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. A contract? I'm your sister. And Maze is a corporation. I don't work for family favors anymore. If you want my food, you sign the papers. Otherwise, I hear that steakhouse you like does private parties. You're being incredibly ungrateful, she hissed. Dad was going to help you with your debt. I don't need Dad's help, I said, watching Shortle stop and tilt his head at a distant siren. I have a partner now. Lance is officially an equity holder. We're doing just fine. The silence on the line was delicious. It was the sound of a leverage play falling apart. Lance, you took money from our little brother? I took an investment from a man who believes in my talent, something you and Dad wouldn't understand. I hung up before she could pivot to an insult. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was better than any double espresso. Shortle trotted over and nudged my hand with his head, his big eyes alert. He knew the energy had shifted. I walked back into the kitchen, my boots clicking with a new kind of authority. Tina, I said, cancel the cheap chicken order for the weekend. We're doing the duck. People are starting to notice us, and I want them to taste exactly what they've been missing. That night, for the first time, we did 55 covers. The dining room felt full. The noise was a symphony of clinking forks and satisfied murmurs. As I looked out from the pass, I didn't look for Mom or Dad. I looked for the people who were actually paying for the dream. Shortle sat in the office doorway, watching the door like a tiny tuxedoed bouncer. We were standing on our own feet now. The victory of the previous night was short-lived. By Thursday morning, the walk-in cooler was dead. Not a flicker of light, not a hum of the compressor, just the thick, humid scent of $4,000 worth of spoiled seafood and wilting greens. Someone pulled the breaker, Tina whispered, pointing to the electrical panel in the alley. The lock had been clipped. I didn't need a detective to tell me who. Dad knew this building. He'd helped me look at the lease. He knew where the vulnerabilities were. This wasn't just a breakdown, it was a message. Come back to the fold or I'll let you rot. I sat on a milk crate in the back, my head in my hands. Shortle sat between my feet, leaning his heavy little head against my shin. He didn't make a sound, but his presence was a solid, warm weight in the freezing morning air. He was the only thing I had that they hadn't touched. My phone buzzed. Mom. Patricia, I heard about the power issues. Such a shame. Dad says he has a friend who can fix it today, but only if you come to dinner tonight to apologize to Winona. She's very hurt about the contract. The ransom note. I looked at the dumpster where I was about to throw my entire week's profit. I looked at Shortle, who was now licking a drop of condensation off my boot. Then I looked at the check Lance had given me. They think I'm weak because I care about this place, I muttered. I stood up and called a local 24-hour electrician, one Dad didn't know. I need a new industrial lock and a full diagnostic, and I need it now. I didn't reply to Mom, I didn't call Dad. Instead, I called my fishmonger. I need a fresh delivery by 4 p.m., double the order of scallops. I'm paying cash. When the electrician arrived, he confirmed the breaker had been manually tripped and the wires tampered with. He fixed it in an hour. By the time the dinner rush started, the kitchen was humming again. At 8 p.m., the door opened. It wasn't my family. It was Sophie Nguyen. She sat at the bar, ordered a glass of wine, and watched me through the pass. I heard you had a rough morning, she said when I brought out her appetizer. Word travels fast, I replied, my voice steady. In this industry, resilience is the best ingredient, and a loyal partner helps, she said, her eyes tracking Shortle as he peeked out from the office. I went back to the stove. I was exhausted, broke, and furious, but as I flipped a fillet of bass, I realized something. They could cut the power, but they couldn't put out the fire. The morning sun hit the grease-stained windows of Maze, but for once, I didn't feel like I was staring at a crime scene. I felt like I was staring at a battlefield I'd survived. The March issue of Portland Monthly dropped at 9 a.m. I found it at the corner bodega, my hands shaking as I flipped through the glossy pages. Page 42. Hidden Gems. 5 restaurants worth saving. There I was, Patricia Cole. The photo showed me at the pass, looking tired but sharp, with Shortle sitting like a gargoyle in the background shadows. The headline read, "Maze's vision is a letter of resilience." Sophie's words were a gut punch. Chef Cole isn't just cooking, she's fighting. The 8-course menu is a masterclass in restraint and purpose. The dumplings taste like a memory that refuses to be forgotten. Maze isn't just a restaurant, it's a statement. I walked back to the restaurant, the magazine tucked under my arm. By the time I opened the doors, the phone was already ringing. Reservations. Real ones. People who didn't know my last name and didn't care about my sister's wedding. Shortle trotted around the dining room as I did the floor sweep, his little chest puffed out. He seemed to sense the change in the air, the lack of panic, the presence of hope. Then the family group chat pinged. Mom, saw the article, Patricia. It's very colorful. Dad says the photo of the dog in the kitchen is a health code risk, but congratulations anyway. Winona, does this mean you're too busy for the wedding? Because I've already contacted a steakhouse since you were being so difficult about the contract. I didn't even type a response. I just took a photo of the sold-out sign I was hanging on the front door for Saturday night and sent it. I looked at Shortle, who was currently investigating a sunbeam on the hardwood floor. They're trying to find a way to make this a failure, Shortle, I said. But the books don't lie. We're in the blat. The bell rang. It was Lance, grinning from ear to ear with a bottle of cheap champagne in his hand. Partner, he said, popping the cork, I think it's time we talk about expansion. I laughed, a real, raw sound, grabbing 2 mismatched wine glasses. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder for Joseph or Joan. I was looking forward. The success of the article brought the one thing I dreaded more than bankruptcy, an unannounced visit from Dad. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was deep in prep, my hands covered in flour as I folded dumplings. Shortle was tucked away in the office. his soft snores the only sound in the quiet restaurant. Then the front door chime rang, not the friendly ding of a customer, but a sharp, heavy strike. Joseph stood in the entryway, his expensive wool coat dripping on my clean floors. He didn't look at the decor or the framed review. He looked at me like I was a balance sheet that didn't add up. "I saw the magazine," he said, his voice echoing in the empty room. "I suppose you think you've won." "I don't think I've won anything, Dad. I'm just working. What are you doing here?" "I came to give you one last chance to be sensible. Winona is distraught. The family is fractured. All because you wanted to play at being a business owner." He walked toward the pass, his eyes narrowing. "I know Lance gave you money. I want you to pay him back. I'll cover the cost and we can close this place down quietly before you embarrass us further." I stopped folding. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked him dead in the eye. "Embarrass you? I'm the only person in this family who actually built something from scratch. You didn't come here to help. You came here because you can't stand that you don't own me anymore." From the office, Shortle appeared. He didn't growl. He just walked out and sat firmly between me and my father, his small, muscular frame planted like a stake in the ground. He looked up at Joseph with a steady, unblinking gaze. "Get that animal away from me," Dad snapped. "He lives here. You're the guest," I said. "And you're leaving. I have a dinner service to run, and for the first time in my life, I don't care what your verdict is." Joseph stared at me, his face reddening. He looked at the dog, then at the sold-out sign. For the first time, he had nothing to say. He turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. I slumped against the counter, my heart thudding. Shortle turned around and nudged my hand with his cold nose. I reached down and picked him up, burying my face in his neck. He smelled of home and hard work. "We're okay," I whispered. "We're more than okay." By the time May rolled around, the air in May's felt different. The frantic, sharp edge of survival had smoothed out into the steady hum of a machine that actually worked. I wasn't just paying the bills, I was building a future. I sat at the bar with Lance, a laptop open between us. Shortle was sprawled out on the cool hardwood floor, his belly up, completely unbothered by the world. "Check the bottom line," I said, sliding the laptop toward my brother. Lance's eyes widened. "Patricia, we're up 22% this month, even after the equipment upgrades?" "Even after the upgrades," I said, a small, tired smile tugging at my lips. I pulled a small envelope from my apron pocket and pushed it across the bar. "Your first dividend. It's not much, but it's real profit." Lance opened the envelope and stared at the check. "I didn't give you that money because I wanted a return, you know?" "I know, but you're a partner, and in this kitchen, everyone gets what they earned." The bell above the door rang. It wasn't a customer. It was a courier with a heavy, cream-colored envelope. I opened it and felt a familiar tightness in my chest. An invitation. Winona's wedding was 3 weeks away. I looked at the gold-embossed lettering. The venue was the steakhouse downtown, the same one they'd chosen over my opening night. There was a handwritten note from Mom on the back. "We'd really like you there, Patricia. No drama, just family, please." "You going?" Lance asked, glancing at the card. "I don't know," I admitted. I looked at the kitchen, then at Shortle, who had woken up and was now resting his chin on my foot. "I finally have peace here. I'm not sure I want to bring their weather back into my life." "You don't have to go as the disappointing daughter anymore," Lance said gently. "You can go as the owner of the most talked-about restaurant in the city." I looked at the invitation again. For the first time, it didn't feel like a summons. It felt like an option. I wasn't a girl hiding in a consulting lie anymore. I was a chef who had survived their sabotage and come out stronger. "Maybe," I said. I reached down and scratched Shortle's ears. "But if I go, I'm leaving early. I have a breakfast shift the next morning, and the fish doesn't wait for anyone." August 12th. I printed the monthly statement and stared at the bottom line until my eyes blurred. For the first time since I turned the key in the lock of Maze, the profit line was black. It wasn't a fortune, $47 after all the loans, labor, and invoices, but it was the most beautiful number I'd ever seen. I grabbed a simple wooden frame and hung the printout on the wall above the pass. Tina laughed as she walked in for her shift. "Chef, people usually frame stars or awards. You're framing $47? "That's my first miracle, Tina," I said, adjusting the frame. "The stars can wait." I didn't go to Winona's wedding. Instead, I sent a simple white card wishing her joy and peace. I didn't send a check, and I certainly didn't offer a discount. I sent a boundary, neatly written and final. Mom called the next day, her voice sounding smaller than I remembered. She talked about the flowers and the steak, but she didn't ask when I was coming home. She asked if she could come to the restaurant for lunch. "I'd like that, Mom," I told her, "but you'll need a reservation. We're booked through the month." That evening, as the dinner rush began to cool, the door opened. It was Sophie Nguyen. She wasn't carrying her notebook this time. She just sat at the bar and looked at the framed $47. "I see you've found your footing," she said. "I found my purpose," I replied, sliding a small plate of grandmother's dumplings toward her, on the house for the honest review. "It was the truth," she said, picking up her chopsticks. "You just had to decide what to do with it." As the last guests filtered out into the humid August night, I walked through the dining room. The air carried the ghost of conversations and the warmth of a full house. I looked back at the kitchen. Shortly was sitting by the back exit with his ears perked, watching the streetlights flicker on. I sat on the floor next to him, leaning my back against the cool wood of the bar. He immediately leaned his weight against my shoulder, a solid, breathing reminder that I hadn't done this alone. I wasn't the daughter they wanted. I wasn't the attorney or the consultant. I was a woman who knew the exact temperature of fire and the precise timing of a dream. "We did it, Shortly," I whispered. He gave a soft, satisfied huff and closed his eyes. I did the same. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running towards a goal or away from a verdict. I was exactly where I was meant to be.